Hi everyone, my name is Philippa Hughes and I lead a project called Looking for America. And over the past year, I've been traveling around the country, meeting people from across the political spectrum and having conversations with them. And it's just been so amazing to hear real American views and unfiltered by media, unfiltered by politicians. But for a little sort of special edition this time around, we partnered up with the Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and we're talking to people in battleground states who are from the left, who identify as left-leaning. And we want to hear from, what our left-leaning friends are saying and thinking about current issues. And so we've got an amazing group of people today. I've actually just met everybody except for Claire, who I knew when she lived in DC. So I'm excited to hear more about what you're up to too, Claire. But I'd love for each of you to introduce yourselves and tell our audience, like, who are you, and where do you come from in terms of Wisconsin politics? I forgot to mention that we are in Wisconsin this week, and we're hearing from, is it Wisconsinites, Wisconsiners, or
Wisconsinites, I guess. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, actually, Ed, would you mind kicking us off?
Yeah, sure. I am Edward DeShazer. I am the executive director of Greater Holy Temple Christian Academy. So we are a K to 8 school. I was born and raised in the Milwaukee area.
Curt, would you mind introducing yourself next?
Sure. And if I freeze up on you, I will await my return of my internet service. Primarily in my work life, a conservationist and conservation biologist. I work with many nonprofits. I work on in a lot of different landscapes in Wisconsin and nationally and even internationally.
Mike, will you go next, please?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Good morning, here it is. I grew up in Manitowoc, which is a smaller city in Wisconsin, and have lived since then in Milwaukee for a year, then DC for 8 years, where I did a lot of schooling and worked for several years for one of our U.S. senators, Russ Feingold. Then I lived again in Milwaukee for 2 years, and now I live in Verona, which is a suburb of Madison. In my day job, I do research and advocacy on issues that are important to poor people at the Community Advocates Public Policy Institute, which is headquartered in Milwaukee. And I'm also a lobbyist in that job, so I have a lot of interaction with our state government. I have a side gig as a co-owner of a very German-style beer garden at Olbert Park in Madison. So it's Oktoberfest season, so a good time to be talking to our friends in Germany. And I also serve on the Dane County Board of Supervisors, which has I got elected in April to that seat, and it's been a very bizarre and trying, but also exciting time to be serving in a public elected office. And I'm a dad of 2 boys, which certainly during the pandemic keeps us busy, and I'll try my best to keep the mute button off. But we may have some visitors and some noise, who knows? Make it more fun.
That's our life now.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Claire, will you go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Claire. I was born and raised in Madison. For college, I left, went to New York, and then spent a number of years living in different places, but returned to Madison about 5 years ago. Wanted to be contributing to my home and also be closer to family. I'm really glad I have come back, and it's really a great state. I am the executive director of an organization called Sustain Dane. Sustain is in sustainability. Dane is in the county where Madison's located. We work a lot with private companies who are looking at how to bring sustainability to their practices for environmental health, also for reducing expenses, profits. We also talk about people a lot and kind of where kind of equity is important for how you get to a sustainable community. I have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. One of them is school aged, one of them is too little, and it is also an interesting time to go through the pandemic with children.
This week's crisis du jour is about the Trump. Well, I thought we could talk about Trump's taxes and how excited I was to see those reports, and the reports are still coming out. It's pretty amazing. What do you think? I mean, probably it's not going to make a difference, right, to voters. That's sort of my gut. What do you think?
I think it might. I think people are generally skeptical of people that are seen as, and I don't know if he really is a fraudster, but it's certainly seen as a fraudster. I think some of his business dealings, things like the Trump steaks and Trump wines, how ridiculous. But the fundamental problem to me with the taxes is that this isn't a Donald Trump problem only. We have people like Jeff Bezos and others who are in the same boat. And so we have this tax code that favors people who are extremely wealthy and can hire the right accountant to figure out how to make it work for them. So we have a system that can be gamed if you're smart enough and you have the privilege and you have the right people working for you. And that's a problem. That's an advantage that those of us who are paying our taxes and doing what we should do, especially running a business, I think as I mentioned, it's sort of unfathomable to me to have a $0 due at the end of the day. So I think voters probably get a question mark in their minds about how can this be? How can we have a system that's like that? And I think part of the problem, though, is that we've had, and I think we can point the finger at both sides on this, that special interests have bought a tax code that's favorable to whichever issue they're working on. And that's fundamentally unfair to everybody else who is doing things right.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. And that's a conversation that, along with taxes and, justice system and all those things, people say that the system is broken, and the system is not broken. The system is doing exactly what it was designed to do by the people who put it in place. And it, like you said, it's not a Trump problem. It is a fundamental problem that people that make that much money are able to, scheme their way around the system. And you hope that these type of things come to light. But you also look at people who are in similar positions. I always use a guy like Wesley Snipes. He went to jail for 3 years for the exact same thing. So then now you'll see, the justice system it's not the same no matter who you are. You look at the people who were paying for their kids to get into college, they get a slap on the wrist and they keep moving. But if I were to do something like that, I'm probably going to sit in jail for a year or two. And it'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds. I do actually think this will have somewhat of a difference. I think the people who voted for Hillary in 2016 are the majority of them, probably 99% will vote for Biden. It's the undecided people who didn't show up, who voted for third party, that I think are going to be the difference makers. And you hope that these are things where, at this point, at what point do people say enough is enough? And you hope that this is something that can start to wake people up, because one of the speaking points that so many people had is, well, he was a successful businessman, so he's going to run the country the same way. And then when you take the mask off, it's like he really wasn't a successful businessman. He just found ways to limit his tax exposure to benefit himself while trying to gain assets in the process. And it's, what's done in dark comes light eventually. And I think it's all starting to come to light.
I think you raised a good point about who will it impact, and that could make a difference. I read the first reports, and then I went to Fox News, and I was like, what's being said on Fox News? And it's fake. The taxes are fake. It's fake. It's fake. And for some people, that is the track they'll stay on. Right there, they're in the Trump cult. It's everything will be there. But you raise a really good point about what about the undecided, or what about people that didn't vote before, and maybe this would be something that would be important enough to bring them to the polls.
I want to take a slightly more cynical view of this because I agree with everything you all just said. And I also think that we already knew the system was broken. And a lot of people who think that Trump is a good businessman, I think they're going to still keep thinking he's a good businessman, because they're going to believe that, the system is the way they've already accepted that the system is the way it is, and they admire him for gaming the system, or for using the system the way it was supposed to be. Smart for doing that. But I do want to, the distinction I want to make, though, is that what he did probably, we don't know yet for sure, but it wasn't just using the system to his benefit, just as anybody else smart would do. He committed fraud, and I think we have to keep keeping those two things separate. Using the system versus actual outright fraud, which is a jailable offense. So I think for me, that'll be interesting is can we convince enough of those swing voters that this is fraud? It's not just, doing using the system as it was meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, and it's, for someone that preaches America first, yet you pay more taxes in foreign countries, like you are doing whatever you can to not do your part in this country. And then the thing that people will fall back on is, well, he's donating his salary. Yeah, he's not taking a salary, but he's also having political events at his golf course that's burning a hole in his pocket. He's also sending people to his Trump towers and, the cost of Secret Service and all those things. I think the thing that bothers me more than anything is the hypocrisy of it all. You go back, they say there's a tweet for everything. You go back, and in 2012, he tweeted about Obama trying to raise taxes, and he talks about Obama paying 20% on his, I don't remember what the amount was, but you're saying that while you yourself are paying $0. It's the do as I say, not as I do. He'll tell us what to do, but he's doing the complete opposite because it benefits him. And that's the most frustrating part for me, is that people are buying into that.
I think we should really shine a light on this idea that he paid taxes in other countries, in a much greater rate than he paid taxes here. That's shocking to me. But I don't know, not shocking to others.
Well, yeah. As Ed has mentioned, it might make a difference for 1 or 2% of people who are persuadable, and it's an issue of fairness, and fairness is always cut a little differently through the fog of identity politics. So there might shave a few percentage points off of supporters, but we're in a really tragic situation where political identity has become so locked in and so impervious to change that it's going to have any other individual in the position of president. This would have been, of course, political suicide, obviously. But we are in a situation where we are locked in. The value systems have locked us into our places in terms of political identity. And it's going to have a minimal effect, but maybe an important one still.
I mean, what I would say though, Curt, is, in Wisconsin, it was only a couple percent as to how he won.
Absolutely.
So it's every little bit counts. And I think I was kind of guilty of this. You come to the feeling that your vote doesn't count. And I know, especially in big cities, and you talk about the rural and urban divide, that's the reason that a lot of these systems were put in place. Because if you just go straight popular vote, the rural communities will never have a voice heard on a national level. So, I think those percentages matter, and it's the people that just refuse to come out and do their part is why we continue with the same systems in place year after year after year, no matter what party's in office.
Yeah, let me respond to that a little bit, Ed. Rural people actually have a disproportionate voice in our system nationally because of the Electoral College, because of the Senate. And we're seeing that. That's the crisis of the moment, particularly with the Supreme Court situation. Because rural states and rural places have a disproportionate representation relative to urban citizens. And the Republican Party, this is their moment to take maximum advantage of that structural, built-in historic legacy. And maybe their last. Because if Democrats prevail in November, they will say, we will expand the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. We will admit 2 new states, whatever, So we are really reckoning with built-in, not only social, cultural legacies of American life and culture, but political, structural, constitutional built-in inequities. So yeah, you're right. I'll stop there.
No, I agree with you completely, Curt, and it makes sense. But like we had kind of talked about it earlier, we have completely different situations, but our problems are the same.